So I wanted to come through and I wanted to talk about soulmates. Um, I've never really believed in soulmates. I never really believed in twin flames and none of that shit because I felt as a gay person that that just wasn't something that was for me. You understand? Because, gay people are oftentimes, pushed to the side, dismissed, and treated as less than. You feel what I'm saying? So I didn't think that I would have a kindred or a soulmate or whatever the case may be. So I never really believed in soulmates or soul connections or whatever people want to call it, or kindreds, not for myself. And most people already know who my soulmate connection was. Most people already know who that person was, you know. But what I want to talk about is how soulmates, or whatever you want to call them, how they are not just what the European white version of what a soulmate is. It's more to it than that. Our soulmates can be our greatest loves, and they can also be our greatest motherfucking enemies as well. Okay? And we have to understand that soulmates or kindreds, whatever you want to call it, some people say it's the same thing, some people say it's not. Tomato, potato, patata. I really don't give a fuck. Whatever you call it, but let's just stick with soulmates. Soulmates oftentimes don't show up in our lives the way that we may expect them or the way that we are taught. We're taught that soulmates are, oh, everything's going to be perfect. And, you two are just going to go off into the sunset with each other. And, your lives are going to be perfect. Bullshit. That's all bullshit. Okay? Bullshit. A lot of times people want the perfect person or the perfect human. But most of the time, when you run into your soulmate, they're going to have a lot of motherfucking problems. 9 times out of 10. Such was the case with my soulmate. Now, there's a difference between having problems and being problematic. My soulmate had problems, but he was not problematic with me. He was able to separate his problems from our relationship, but he had problems. He had personal problems, you know, and a lot of that was spiritual. A lot of that was spiritual. And what's interesting, and I'm about to be really real with you all, because I get a lot of spiritual messages, especially through my, I get a lot of spiritual messages. That's all y'all need to know. And I remember this one spiritual message that I saw. Well, it was actually a meditation. I was in meditation, and I'll just say that much. I was in meditation, and in this meditation, I could actually feel the physical experiences that was happening. It was happening to me. It was happening to me. I was a child this was in a past life or in another reality. I was a child, and there was a woman that was molesting me in this past life. Not in this life, let me be clear, not in this life, in a past life. And it was so vivid and so real. And I knew in this meditation state or this dream state, I knew that this woman was supposed to be my mother figure in this past life. So it was very vivid and very disturbing to me, when I came out of meditation. But what I was doing was I was recalling a past life trauma, and I've carried that trauma over into this life. So now let's get back to my soulmate connection. Okay, some people know who he was. Some people don't. If you don't, you just SOL. I'm not going to mention it. But if you do, then you do. So when I really started to put the pieces of the puzzle together, I was like, well, is, who was that woman in my current life? Who was that person? You have to remember, we've all been different sexes, male and female. We have to remember that. A lot of times we get too stuck on the gender that we are now when we have been both male and female in prior lives. Okay? But there are many different scenarios that play out between soulmate connections or kindreds or twins, whatever you want to call it. Again, if they're all different, then they're just all different. But I'm just saying that for the sake of whatever, just to tell you my story. So, getting back to the story, I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together, you know, and not until recently. Sometimes it takes a minute before the channel really comes through for you to get the information, because I had that dream, meditation, whatever you want to call it. I had that. What was that? That was early part of this year. But here lately, I've been getting a lot of spiritual messages and a lot of synchronicities, and some of the things I'm not going to get into because they're very personal. They're very personal stuff between my soulmate and I. Okay, but this I'm gonna talk about. Um, so I was, like I said, I was putting the pieces of the puzzle together, and it finally came to me. That woman in the dream was my soulmate, kindred, in this current life, although he has transitioned. But that was my soulmate. And when he came back around this time, he was a man, and he came back around to help me heal and balance out the trauma that he had caused me in a past life. That is what we do as soulmate connections, because we are not always in love. We're not always, going off into the sunset to live happily ever after. That is not always the narrative between soulmate connections, real soulmate connections. Because when you have a real soulmate connection with somebody, there's so many different scenarios that may play out between you and that person in different lives. And I've seen the different lives that me and my soulmate connection have had. We've been brother and sister, where he was the sister and I was the brother. Okay. And like I said, in this particular life where he traumatized me and molested me, he was my mother. He played the role of my mother, and he was molesting me. And before he died in this life, he came back around to help me heal from that trauma, to help me balance out whatever trauma and energy, or help me to release whatever trauma and energy that he had caused in a prior life. And see, I carried over that trauma and that energy into this life. And that has been the main catalyst of a lot of my obstacles and a lot of my issues in this life. So when you think about a soulmate connection, you have to really expand, your consciousness in regards to how you think about them, because it's not always peaches and cream. Real soulmate connections, Real soulmate connections, real twins, or whatever you want to call them, whatever your interpretation or definition of a soulmate is, we go through a lot of changes with each other. We go through a lot of trauma with each other at times because we come down here to do this work. We come down here to do this work. But I found that to be very interesting because I could not understand why I was having that vivid, meditation or dream or whatever you want to call it. I couldn't understand it. I couldn't put my finger on it until I finally got quiet in my mind and the information finally came to me and gave me the clarity that I needed. And the clarity, I was like, who is that? And then it finally came to me. I said, oh, a lot of times when I get confirmation about spiritual information, I will go, oh, I go, just, oh, that's what it is. So, that is how I felt. I was like, oh, now I get it. So that was my soulmate in that past life. And he came into this life as a man to help me heal from the trauma that he had caused me when he was my mother in that past life who molested me. And like I said, we bring sometimes when you are molested in a past life, you can bring that energy and that trauma over into this life. And a lot of the emotions and a lot of the energy that I presented was that of someone who had been sexually abused, because that was the energy that I was carrying over in my cell memory from a past life. But what my soulmate did, who was the perpetrator of that, he came through in this life as a man to help me balance that out and to help me heal from that. And that to me is more amazing and more beautiful than the, hunky dory, bullshit that they tell us about soulmates. Oh, we go off into the sunset and everything's going to be perfect and everything's going to be happy. To me, that is more beautiful and that is more meaningful and that is more just more I can't think of any more words, but that is more beautiful and meaningful, and it has more meaning and more love in that than anything else. For someone to come back around to help you heal something that they did to you in a past life, that is very motherfucking powerful, if you ask me. That is very fucking powerful. And that is how we have to think about soulmate connections. And I'm talking to black people. I'm talking to my people. Okay. That is how we have to think of soulmate connections. It's not always peaches and cream. There is a polarity and a flip side to everything. Okay. Let me say that again. There is a polarity to everything. Everything has a polarity to it, and everybody knows that. But a lot of times we get blinded when it comes to love and soulmates and twin flames because everybody wants this fairy tale. And honey, let me tell you, fairy tales are just that. They're fairy tales. Okay, you saw how Princess Diana's fairy tale turned out, didn't you? Okay, then. Because when you are dealing with real soulmate connections, you're dealing with some real motherfucking shit. It's not just about, going off into the sunset and living happily ever after like these other people have told us, these others. Their definition of, soulmates or whatever the case may be. That's their definition. And we've been so mind controlled and put up under these spells that we're so busy watching for their version of a soulmate, which is all bullshit. That's just, the glamour of it all, which means it's just an illusion, making you think something that it's really not. Okay. We're so wrapped up into thinking that that shit is the real motherfucking deal that we're missing out on what a real soulmate is supposed to be. A real soulmate, they teach us something. And by God, I learned a lot from my soulmate connection, kindred, whatever you want to call it. I learned a lot. He helped me to expand my consciousness to the next level. That was a spiritual game changer for me. That was a major spiritual game changer for me. You know, I remember when I like to use Charmed as a reference sometime because Charmed had a lot of subliminal messages in it and stuff like that. And I remember there was one episode of Charmed where Paige finally became a full-fledged white lighter, and she got her first charge. Now, for those people who do not know what a white lighter is, it's equivalent to an angel. So Paige got her first charge, and her first charge, she didn't know it, but her first charge was her biological father, Sam, who was a fallen white lighter. Okay, because remember, Paige had the same mother as the sisters. That is how she was a witch, because she came from the female Halliwell line. She didn't come from the male. She came from the female Halliwell line. So she was she was a witch from the female side. That's how they were able. That's how she was able to be a witch, because she came from the female side. But she had a different father from Piper, Prue, and Phoebe. Her father was Sam. He was a white lighter, and he had an affair with their mother, Patty, for those people who watch Charm. So Paige's first charge was her father, but she didn't know that at first. And when Leo took her to the place that she had to go to find him, it was in this dark, seedy, alley that looked very, dirty and musty. And she was like, "Oh God, how come I couldn't? Why couldn't I have gotten a nice dancer or something like that?" Well, that's the same thing with soulmate connections. Everyone wants something that looks pretty. I'm not talking about physically pretty. I'm just saying pretty in the sense everyone wants the easy, pretty, nice little, soulmate where everything is perfect. But if you have that, what the fuck would you have learned? Because it's about learning. Most people are not with their soulmates. Most people who are married to other people, they are not your soulmates. They're not. Most people don't know who their kindred or their soulmate is. Well, it may be a kindred, but when it's a strong soulmate connection, you will know it. You will know it. But most people are not with their soulmate. I was fortunate enough to meet that powerful kindred soulmate in my life. I was fortunate enough, but that's because it was supposed to happen. He and I have been looking for each other for a very, very long time. We were right here in the same motherfucking town. He and I have been looking for each other for a very long motherfucking time. Our souls were looking for each other, you know? So I just wanted to come through and I just wanted to expound upon that because it was on my mind and it was something that I had decoded. And I figured out that he was the one who was the character of my mother in that particular past life, who had molested me. And then I carried that trauma over to this life. And he came back around before he died. He came back around and helped me to heal that trauma and to release it, because that is what soulmates do. Okay, that's all I have to say in this video, and I'm out.